House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business. Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We got a great show coming up for you.
You know, the last couple of years, daily fantasy sports have been everywhere. You've seen it on TV. Hey, you even heard me read commercials for them on this radio show. But do we really know what we're putting our money into? An amazing book has come out to show you what goes on behind the scenes in these big daily fantasy sports companies. The book is called Dueling with Kings, High Stakes, Killer Sharks, and the Get-Rich Promise of Daily Fantasy Sports. We have the author with us, Daniel Barbarisi, who was a former Yankee beat writer for the Wall Street Journal. He gave all that up to dive into the world of daily fantasy sports, and he wrote an incredible book about it. I couldn't put this book down. An absolute incredible story. So stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
I owed the IRS $10,000.
The IRS garnished my wages.
They put a lien on my house.
I'm self-employed and didn't report all my income. They claim I owe a lot more than I do.
The IRS is the most powerful collection agency in the world. They do not give up until you pay.
I couldn't sleep. We were being audited. I called Tax Solutions Now, and a great big weight was lifted off my shoulders.
I called Tax Solutions Now, and they got the IRS off my back.
Tax Solutions Now had my wage garnishment lifted in 48 hours.
Tax Solutions Now can get you help. Our agents know the rules, can stop the pain, and get you the best deal.
Tax Solutions Now saved my business.
I qualified for the Fresh Start program. I paid less than I owed.
We connect you with a team of former IRS agents and tax professionals who get the IRS off your back. Time is running out. Call Tax Solutions now.
Call 800-297-9788. 800-297-9788.
Psst. Yeah, you. Come here. Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore. Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here. Use the offer code SPICE404. They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
Is your bathroom looking old and worn out? Want to update it, but you don't know where to start? Then let BCI Bath & Shower show you how to turn that old bath into an aisle of beauty and functionality. Our residential bathroom solutions provide the best value on the market, and our customer service is second to none. Our cost-effective BCI Bath & Shower family of products has what you need.
Remodeling our bathroom was a big decision for us.
They didn't make a mess out of our house at all. And at the end of the day, we had a beautiful new bathroom. And it was a great experience the whole way through.
We have the best monthly payment programs in the industry, with payments as low as $68 per month or no interest, no payments for 18 months. For a limited time, be one of the first 100 callers who schedule a free in-home consultation and receive $500 off. Call 1-800-594-9530. 1-800-594-9530. Factory trained and certified installers made in the USA and discounts for seniors and military. BCI Bath and Shower, the leader in affordable bathroom products.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com.
You know, over the last few years, daily fantasy sports has dominated the sports scene. A couple of years ago, you couldn't turn on the TV or radio without hearing one of the commercials. You know, I even had to read them for the show. But an amazing new book is taking us behind the scenes of this interesting world of daily fantasy sports. That book is Dueling with Kings, and the writer is Daniel Barbarisi, who is the Yankees beat writer for the Wall Street Journal. And we're lucky to have Daniel on the phone with us now. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Dan, first off, Dueling with Kings is an amazing, eye-opening book. And as I said before, you were already in the sports scene, but it took another sports writer to turn you on to daily fantasy sports. So how'd that come about?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, I hadn't really heard of daily fantasy sports at all until about April, May of 2015 when I was covering the Yankees for the Wall Street Journal, as you noted, and another sports writer, we were actually in the press box at Fenway Park, and another sports writer essentially showed me FanDuel, and I was struck by three immediate reactions. The first was, whoa, this is really fun. The second was, how on earth is this legal? And the third was, I'm going to make a ton of money on this. So I was right on the first two in that it is a lot of fun as a game itself. The second is, it is crazy that it's legal at all, and that struck me in the same way it struck a lot of other people. And then the third part I was definitely wrong about, where I thought I was going to suddenly get rich quick because I was a baseball writer, and obviously I should be so good at this daily fantasy sports baseball thing. And that part I was very, very wrong about.
The first time I heard about daily fantasy sports is I was given a script to read for the commercials for this show. I mean, FanDuel sent me a script. They open up an account for me. They put money in the account, and they say, hey, you know what? Play every week, talk about your personal experiences, and then read the rest of the script. So that was my introduction to daily fantasy sports. The last time I heard about fantasy sports was, you know, guys getting together and doing a year-long league, and they had, you know, drafts in bars and basements. And so your initial impression of daily fantasy sports was, wow, how could this actually be legal and fun?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people came into it in a similar way to you, where, you know, and I did as well, that what we had the relationship with fantasy sports was exactly that, picturing the guys, you know, sitting around, you know, you have your league. I've been doing that kind of stuff since really the late 90s. And it's just a fun leisure activity with your friends. And, you know, yes, there is technically a lot of the time money involved, but it's the kind of thing where you might win $200, $300 at the end of the year. And, you know, it's pretty hard to call that gambling in any real sense, because the event frequency is just so low. And the potential payoff, I think, for the time invested is also incredibly low. But, you know, with daily fantasy sports, that all changed in an instant, you know, where you're redoing this event every day. You can put in entries to literally hundreds of contests at any one time if needed. And it's just a completely different game. It was to me an obvious gambling game. And that's, I think, what struck many people. But that's when when it all started to really hit the scene, and when you were doing those readouts and advertisements and all that in the summer of 2015,
yep.
which was when that ad blitz really started to hit. That was when I was kind of trying to figure out the whole thing and see, okay, where did this come from? How did this happen? What is it? And at that time, I was trying to figure out, really, is this whole thing on the level? Is this okay? Is it the kind of thing we should be concerned about? Is it, because again, I did certainly tell it was fun, but I could also tell there were a lot of things wrong under the hood, where the thing had grown so fast that there were no controls in place and no certainly regulations in governing it, and nothing around it basically saying, okay, this is something where you could feel yourself as the consumer using it, that everything is protected, that everything is clear, and everything is kind of safe for you to be in this space. And that's one of the things that struck me right away. And what made me want to do the book about it was that when I was kind of diving into it and I was suffering a lot of early losses, I was seeing a lot of things that were very, very weird to me, a lot of things that really struck me in strange ways. And a lot of those were kind of things that would eventually come out in larger mass media. And people would also notice this stuff and say, oh, hey, a lot of this is not normal. A lot of this is probably not good. We should probably take a look into this. And so that's what I was experiencing at the time. And that's a lot of stuff that's in the early parts of the book, is recognizing early on that there was a lot of stuff wrong with this, that despite the fact this was a lot of fun and kind of a cool game, it was a bit of a Wild West environment, and there were a lot of things that really need to be changed about it.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Attention seniors with Medicare. This is an important announcement. Did you know you may qualify for a monthly Social Security rebate? Did you know you may qualify for a $0 monthly premium? That's right. You may qualify to get $135 added back to your Social Security check each month. Just call the Medicare benefits line to get your options. It's a free call. You may also qualify for $0 premiums, dental coverage, vision coverage, hearing coverage, and prescription drug coverage. With this type of plan, you don't need Medicare supplement insurance. Call now, because you deserve to get the most from your Medicare benefits, including a rebate to your Social Security check each month. Agents are standing by with free information regarding Medicare benefits. It's a free call with no obligation, but it could mean big savings for you. Call the Medicare benefits line now to see if you're eligible for a Social Security rebate.
Call 800-574-6770. 800-574-6770.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
Knife. Not thrilling, but knife.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com.
For those of you just joining us, we are talking with Daniel Barbarisi, author of Dueling with Kings, which is an incredible look inside the world of daily fantasy sports. Now, I split my time between New Jersey and Boston, and I'm familiar with your wife, Emily Benjamin, and in my opinion, she's one of the best sports writers in the country. What was your
Well,
conversation?
thank you on her behalf.
What was your conversation like when you told her, you know what, I want to quit my job and devote all my time to playing daily fantasy sports?
It was really more of a conversation of I want to quit my job and devote my time to writing a book about this insane world. And so that was something she could certainly get behind.
Okay.
And her concept, and her reaction was, yeah, I see that this thing is nuts. And, I said, I think the best way to tell this story is to really live it full time and to be involved in it full time and to really be inside this thing. And that's the best way to get the best narrative about it and get the way to really tell what's going on with this. And she was supportive of that. And I will say, by the time I actually quit my job, we're about, kind of is halfway through the narrative of the book. By that time, everything had gone crazy, and it was kind of well proven that I was really deep inside the whole thing. So, I mean, I don't think she would have been okay with it, or that I would have done it if I had just said it from the start. If kind of where the book picks up in May of 2015, where I discover it in, the Fenway Park press box, if I'd come home that day and said, hey, sweetie, I think I'm going to go quit my job and be a DFS player full time, and maybe I'll write something about it, would she have said, yeah, that's a great idea? But by the time the Wall Street Journal actually kind of forced me to make that decision by saying, well, you can do the book or you can be the Yankees beat writer, but you can't do both. It was, 6 or 7 months into it, and I was already pretty well established in the DFS world. And I think by that time it seemed like less of a crazy thing, but still a little crazy. So, there was definitely a lot of worry there, and she was definitely, had to take a leap of faith in trusting me that this was all going to turn out okay. But, I think relatively speaking, it did. So, we look back on that as a positive decision.
Okay. See, I'm a fan of you for just pulling that part of it off. Good for you. When you jumped into the world of daily fantasy sports, it appeared that initially maybe people weren't too enthusiastic about speaking with you. Is that correct? Were they pretty guarded on what they said to you first off?
It's funny. It went through two phases. Initially, they were extremely happy to talk to me because it was before everything had really gone crazy, with the quote-unquote Ethan Haskell scandal in the fall of 2017, which was when one of the employees at DraftKings, a guy named Ethan Haskell, was accused of a quote-unquote insider trading, using information from his company to bet on events at FanDuel. And from what I've dealt with, I don't think that was something he was doing, but it certainly exposed a situation where there were no controls over anything, and it's the kind of thing that easily could have happened because the situation was so, Wild West and so all over the place. And, the ridiculous initial situation of employees of one company being able to bet on the other one's site, which seemed like an obvious no-brainer that you should not be able to do that. But stuff like that was happening all the time.
I mean, technically, that wasn't illegal. I think it just look bad?
No. Yeah, I mean, nothing they did really was illegal per se. Mm-hmm. It was all just extremely, I would say, improper. Emblematic of a situation where these companies had grown well beyond any ability for them to regulate themselves. And, people were just kind of doing whatever they could get away with. A lot of things that would not be technically illegal, but would certainly not pass the sniff test. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff all over the place as I kind of try to deal with in the book. But so initially, before any of that happened, they loved talking to me because they were essentially saying, we're so big, we're growing so fast, everybody loves us. Then as soon as the Haskell stuff happened, everybody shut down in a major way. And everyone was very worried. Although at that point, I was already kind of on the inside because I had started this project, before everything went crazy. And so when a lot of other media came out of the woodwork looking to talk to these people, they were not allowed in at all. And I was able to get some level of access because people trusted me from being in from before everything went wrong. And so, I wasn't really viewed as some Johnny-come-lately who was looking to take advantage of the scandal. They were more like, okay, well, this guy's been in for a while already. We'll talk to you. Although it definitely became harder from that point on to get any real, access with some people. And some were very wary, and were hard to deal with throughout. But I think generally speaking, it did go in two phases. And then, that allowed me to kind of have the insider access that a lot of other people were not allowed to get just because I was on scene earlier.
You mentioned laws, and in the book you mentioned one law, the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act, or the UIGEA, which outlawed online poker. Now, was that the spark that helped grow fantasy sports And was that also the specter that people thought that could do us in?
Yeah, a little both. I mean, it's funny. I caution away from using the word fantasy sports when describing all of this. And the industry wants you to do that. But the reality is that, season-long traditional fantasy sports and daily fantasy sports are two very different animals. Or one is really a mutant strain of the other. You're being daily like the mutated version of season-long. Season-long being the one we're kind of all familiar with, with all the dudes in the basement.
Yeah.
But, it's the UIGA is what mutated that game. It's exactly what happened. And so what happened was in 2006, they sought to ban, the U.S. government, federal government, sought to ban online poker, and they were largely successful in doing so, even though it took a while to kind of really bear fruit. But with UIGA, they knocked online poker out effectively, and at that time, the sports leagues were worried that was going to lead to the eradication of their very pleasant and really not thought of as any sort of a problem season-long fantasy sports hobby industry, which is small but growing at the time. And so the authors of that bill, UIGA, put in a provision, a carve-out that said, in this online poker barring bill, fantasy sports are exempted. They're okay. And so fantasy was really protected. Now, what happened was right after that, some really smart guys took a look at that law, and they said, hey, wait, if I build a game to the exact tenets of this carve-out, I can create essentially nationalized, legalized sports gambling around fantasy sports. And that was correct. And it was legal. And so that's where daily fantasy sports was born, essentially in the spring of 2007. And it kind of took off slowly. But once people realized over a few years, oh, wait, this is legal. This is okay. And no one's going to come bust us at the federal level. Big money started to get behind it. And the companies, particularly FanDuel at first, really started to grow. And so, that was what allowed it to go forward. And I think it generally has been protected at the federal level. The problem these companies had was that there were no protections built in at the state level. And UIGA protected them pretty well, nationally, but it did nothing for them at the states. And the federal government has traditionally left gambling law up to the states. So, depending on what your state laws were, in some states, DFS was in pretty good shape. And then about half of the rest, it was on fairly shaky legal ground. And that's what we've seen over the last year or two is these states fight it out, these companies, FanDuel and DraftKings, fight it out in the states where they're on shaky legal ground, that roughly half of states. And those are the ones where you've seen attorney generals come after them and, a big fight in the state of New York, which is one of the things I really detail in the book. The companies won that fight, which is what allowed them to stay in business. But they've also had a lot of other tough ones in places like Texas, where they're kind of half operating, and Florida, where they're operating, but they probably are in a little bit of a shaky legal environment if somebody decides to press the issue, or places like states where they're actually banned right now, places where they don't have positive legal footing, and so they are want to stay out of it.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
I owed the IRS $10,000.
The IRS garnished my wages.
They put a lien on my house.
I'm self-employed and didn't report all my income. They claim I owe a lot more than I do.
The IRS is the most powerful collection agency in the world. They do not give up until you pay.
I couldn't sleep. We were being audited. I called Tax Solutions Now, and a great big weight was lifted off my shoulders.
I called Tax Solutions Now, and they got the IRS off my back.
Tax Solutions Now had my wage garnishment lifted in 48 hours.
Tax Solutions Now can get you help. Our agents know the rules, can stop the pain, and get you the best deal.
Tax Solutions Now saved my business.
I qualified for the Fresh Start program. I paid less than I owed.
We connect you with a team of former IRS agents and tax professionals who get the IRS off your back. Time is running out. Call Tax Solutions now.
Call 800-297-9788. 800-297-9788.
Hey, this is Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards with your House of Cards Gaming Report for the week of September 6, 2021. Both New Jersey and Nevada reported impressive revenue numbers for their casinos. The state of New Jersey reported a profitable second quarter for 8 of the 9 Atlantic City casinos, while Nevada casinos reported a record July with over $1.3 billion in winnings. Nevada slot machines also reported their best month ever in July with over $873 million in revenue. Fantasy sports contests became legal in Arizona during the last weekend of August. Currently, there are 6 licensed fantasy sports operators in the state: DraftKings, FanDuel, FFPC, Yahoo, Fantasy Sports Shark, and Underdog Sports. The launch of fantasy sports came as part of the legislation Arizona Governor Doug Ducey signed earlier this year to legalize sports gambling. And finally, football season is here, and as you can imagine, the NFL is expected to earn a lot of money from its casinos and sports betting deals. And now we know how much they expect to receive. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, the NFL estimates that it will receive around $270 million this year from its various agreements with casinos and sportsbook operators. That figure could potentially grow to about $1 billion during this next decade. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on Twitter at HOC Radio.
You're listening to House of Cards. Check out our website at houseofcardsradio.com.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com.
For those of you just joining us, we are talking with Daniel Barbarisi, author of Dueling with Kings, which is an incredible look inside the world of daily fantasy sports. Now, when you entered the world of daily fantasy, there were 2 really big players in the field. That was DraftKings and FanDuel. And you seemed to have much more contact with Nigel Eccles from FanDuel. What was his business philosophy regarding daily fantasy?
I think he just saw it as an incredible growth opportunity. You know, I mean, Nigel is an entrepreneur, and he saw a chance to grow a business. You know, Nigel is not a sports guy. He's not somebody, you know, he did come from the English kind of betting industry, but I don't really see him as that kind of, you know, as a gambling industry guy per se, in that I think whatever he does next may not be in that space. But you know, he is a very interesting guy, and, you know, I think I referred to him in the book as kind of the Henry Ford of the industry, whereas he didn't come up with the original idea, but he made it something that was able to be consumed by the masses. And so, very interesting guy, very smart guy, one who really grew the industry into, you know, what it was in the step before it was today. And then the arrival of DraftKings in 2012 is what really turbocharged it, and that's the Boston-based company, you know, that was founded by Jason Robbins, Matt Kalish, and Paul Lieberman. And those guys really took on FanDuel and were willing to push the envelope in a lot of ways that FanDuel was not, in kind of pushing the legal boundaries of what UICA allowed and being much more aggressive and really going after the poker crowd and really trying to grow the industry in ways that FanDuel was sometimes hesitant to do. And, you know, at the time, FanDuel and people who were kind of, the industry became very factionalized in that those who supported DraftKings and their push to grow at all costs, and those who were kind of more on the FanDuel train of, we should take it slower, this growth is going to get us in trouble. And I think both were right in that DraftKings was right in that they were able to push and be more aggressive than I think FanDuel realized they could be in terms of offering other types of games like golf and stuff like that, and that they probably should have gone after the poker crowd. And FanDuel was right in that they recognized that the growth that DraftKings was pushing for was going to get them all in trouble, and that they were trying to grow too fast and too hard. And that's what really screwed the industry up, was when, you know, DraftKings wanted to advertise FanDuel into oblivion. FanDuel had to fight back, and that created the advertising war that led to the level of scrutiny that ticked everybody off. You know, the ads really, you know, the ads aggravated everyone, and that made it such that when there was a desire to look into this industry and to say, hey, there are some things that are wrong here. There was a national appetite to, snack these guys on the bottom because they were so annoying by that point. Their ads were everywhere. And, there was a real, schadenfreude for, looking at these guys and saying, let's see them get their comeuppance, because they did grow so fast and the advertising was so pernicious and pervasive that, people were happy to see them get knocked down a peg.
Yeah, I had to do 4 or 5 a week. I was like, boy, how many do they want from me?
And you were benefiting.
Yeah, no, hey, I was like, wow, they're really overdoing it. Hey, I wasn't, no problem with me, but
yeah.
In the book, the players you described were incredibly interesting as well. I mean, those guys partied like rock stars. They had the best clubs, best restaurants. They partied at the Playboy Mansion. And I think one of the most interesting was your mentor. I guess you called himself Beep I'm a Jeep. Now, is he the one that really gave you the most insight on how to really play daily fantasy?
Yeah, and Beep Jay Rayner, a really wonderful guy, lives near Toronto. He's a really interesting and kind of very well-known guy within that, world, within the DFS space. And he's one of the kind of original big-time pros in this, which, really only takes you about 5-6 years. But that does make him pretty old school in this. And so he kind of not volunteered, but I asked him to mentor me. And that's what really brought me into that world in a major way. And so he took me really under the hood and was able to get to know a lot of the top players from kind of being with him and living with him for a very brief time and, really seeing how it all works behind the scenes. And so, yeah, he took me in and really, I learned a tremendous amount from him. And, he kind of mentored me in fantasy hockey, which I thought was going to be a tremendously stupid thing to do because I was a baseball writer. I thought I was going to be a big baseball expert. And then, of course, I was proven wrong because I didn't understand the game itself is not just about understanding baseball. It's understanding systems and game theory and how to game the game itself. And, he taught me a lot of that. But he said, a lot of the reasons you're not doing well in baseball is that you need to wipe the slate clean of your kind of preconceived notions. And I want to start you from scratch with something you don't really know anything about, which is fantasy hockey. And so I said, that sounds absolutely crazy. I haven't paid attention to hockey since the 94 Rangers. But he said, no, that's a great idea. And amazingly, he was proven correct.
Yeah, boy.
And then I did, I don't want to give too much away, but I don't want to give it all away, but yeah, I became pretty good at it. And then I think it was a pretty crazy story, I think, but it also speaks to the idea of, what that world is like, which is that, it is much more a math game with a sports facade than really a sports game per se, I think.
I think that's what really shocked me. It didn't seem like they were real big sports fans, but this was almost like an academic exercise because they really never watched the games they had money on, which was shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, some guys do and some guys don't. But certainly a lot of the big-time pros think that it's very detrimental to watch, to sweat the games full-time. Yeah. And I certainly experienced that as well. When you're watching those games, you can really drive yourself crazy. Mm-hmm. The swings, the emotional swings of going up and down, hundreds to thousands of dollars in any one moment, with the crack of a bat or, one shot one way or the other on a court or on ice. I mean, it will drive you crazy if you do it for too long. And a lot of the top guys recognize that, and they try to really actively stay away from sweating the games, but it's very hard to do so. And so, it's a real emotional roller coaster, and they know that. As you saw in the book, I deal with some of the problem gambling issues that, have arisen from this and, that plague this world. And the companies, I think, are better about that stuff now, but it's always going to be a part of it. No question about it.
I was really amazed at some of the other techniques these guys use to play. The use of algorithms was shocking to me. How would these top players use these computer programs to make their picks?
What it really is just kind of streamlining what takes you a while to do. So, I mean, what would happen is if you're doing your picks, say you look at whatever bunch of stats, whether it's, individual, we'll do a baseball example. Let's say it's maybe like the Vegas odds for how many runs the team is going to score that day, or what a player's batting average is in his last 10 games, or if you want to really drill down to it, what his exit velocity is on balls to right field, what his launch angle is. You can get really technical in drilling down to a lot of the stats, but doing those will take you a while. So, and you kind of have to repeat that process every day for every player if you really want to cast a wide net. So a lot of the top players started doing, a lot of these guys are very, very, very computer savvy. They would kind of systemize that. They would build an algorithm that would say, okay, they would throw in a bunch of stats, a bunch of the stats that whoever the individual player thought were valuable, and put weighted averages on each of those and say, okay, I think that, recent slugging percentage is worth this much, and I think that the chance to steal a base is worth this much, and I think that, say, the platoon advantage in baseball, righty hitter, say, versus a lefty pitcher, is worth this much. And I'm going to give all those things kind of a weight. And I'll put them all into this big pot, and I'll stew it up. And then at the end of the day, my algorithm, my program will spit out a number. And it'll say, this player is the best rating that day. And then if the guy wants to, he can then pick that player because his system, his model, has told him he thinks it's the best chance that day. Now, the reality is, if you make a crappy model, if you weight things wrong, if you're looking at the wrong numbers, your algorithm is not going to be good. It's going to help you to lose, not to win. But over time, a lot of these guys refined these algorithms to the point where they were really, really effective. And that allowed them to essentially then drop in, massively impressive lineups at the drop of a hat. They could literally generate them instantly. And so what then happened is in the daily fantasy system, if you have one good lineup, you can put that lineup in everywhere. And you can then create variations on it. If you have the ability to create multiple entries of those excellent lineups, you can then create the 150 best and most effective lineups and throw them into a tournament and have them drop in en masse and create a tremendous advantage for yourself, or even as many as 500 highly intelligent computer-generated algorithm-created lineups. And that's one of the things that really ticked me off, which is that, okay, I don't mind that these players are necessarily doing this, but the companies allowed them to leverage that advantage to what I thought was a very, very unhealthy degree for the kind of average player like me. And so that's one of the things that really bothered me about it. I think that's one of the things that bothered a lot of people about the way the daily fantasy industry was when I first got into it, 2015 or so. Now, they've made a lot of improvements since then to cut down on, I think, a lot of the mass multi-entry stuff. But, it's still definitely a problem. And it's the kind of situation where, if you're the average person getting into this, you have to know that you're dealing with a playing field that is very, very tough on you, where the best players are very, very, very good. And, you're going to face an uphill battle to get rich quick, as the commercials led you to believe you could do.
I got to tell you, I read that part and I was looking at it, I was like, wow, I didn't stand a chance when I was playing for it. Wow, boy. You also mentioned, which was also against the rules, is collusion. Did you see a lot of that? I mean, I know there was one part in the book where I believe it was the hockey finals where one guy was going around showing his lineup. I don't know if that rose to the level of collusion, but did you see a lot of collusion when you were in that world?
Not a lot, no. Some examples of it, and it's funny because it's kind of thing where it's very much the pornography definition. You don't know exactly how to describe it, but you know it when you see it. And there are a lot of things where they are in a gray area, and it's like, okay, if two friends are talking about a lineup, that's fine. And even if, for instance, there's two brothers, these guys Chipotle Addict and Papa Gates, who are two of the highest level players, and they put in very similar lineups a lot of the time because they worked on their original algorithms and models together. But it's very hard to prove, and people don't know if they are actually colluding. They've been accused of it, and I'm not sure if they are or not. But it's very hard to prove if they are because, how do you figure that out? I think what would be collusion is if two people were working together and their lineups actually didn't end up overlapping at all. And that would be a way of circumventing the entry limits that have been put on these contests, saying essentially you can't put in more than 150 entries by yourself because that would be an advantage. And if two people then put in two very similar sets of lineups but didn't have any overlap, where you then essentially get 300 unique, very effective lineups that are built around the same groups of players, that would be a type of collusion. And I think with those guys, for instance, that's what people were looking for. And I'm not sure if that really was the case then with them. It's very, very hard to say. I'm not in a position to really say whether they were or weren't or what the actual outcomes were in that specific case. But that kind of stuff would be the collusion that people were talking about, what they were worried about and fearful of. And so, there are examples of that kind of stuff, people at least being worried about it, and examples certainly of high-level players, groups of them kind of working in cohorts to try to create the best and best lineups. And it, legally, or even by the, when I say legal, I mean by the terms of the sites, it's hard to say where the line is crossed. But certainly, there are groups where 3 or 4 very, very effective players play somewhat as a team and share information and share concepts and lineups. And yeah, that's another thing that if you're the little guy, that'll probably tick you off. And, it certainly is one of the things that bothered me initially. And, it goes on in this world, and it's definitely hard to police it when it's at the less collusive level and more just at the, hey, these are smart guys working together. It's like, okay, can you really stop that? I don't know. The sites definitely try to clamp down on the actual collusion stuff, but, the really effective players working as in a team format, that's harder to figure out where you draw the line on that. And that's something I think they're certainly struggling with to this day.
We'll be right back with more House of Cards after this.
Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore. Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here. Use offer code SPICE404. They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
You're listening to House of Cards.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day. No way. I'll give you 3-1 odds. No. 5-1. No. 10-1. You're on.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you.
For those of you just joining us, we are talking with Daniel Barbarisi, author of Dueling with Kings, which is an incredible look inside the world of daily fantasy sports. Now, players seem to have their own kind of language. You know, there was chalk, contrarian, stacking, and like I said, you became very successful in hockey. Were these some of the strategies you used for your success in daily fantasy sports?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tried to use, whatever Beep and other people would teach me. And I tried to understand the best individual methods of doing this, while not doing anything that would be ever considered wrong, but just understanding how these guys would play and how to do it. Now, I was never a mass multi-entry guy. I never really effectively used an algorithm or anything like that. I tried to do it kind of what I would call the quote-unquote right way, and whatever. That's a little bit high-minded of me. But, I tried to just take his teachings and get good with them as the way I could. It's funny, you do certainly become immersed in it over time and really come to live that world. And, I'd like to think I became very fluent in all of it, but that was the idea, was to become one of these guys in order to tell the story of what life is like in there.
I was also surprised that, like in poker, players bought other players' action. And so how was this used? in daily fantasy.
Yeah, that was something that really surprised me. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't, you guys know poker a lot better than I do. Yeah. I didn't know even that was a thing that went on in that world. And so until then, when Beep started trying to buy and sell my action, and so, he got behind me in certain ways and would back me and stake me at times, and then also wanted a piece of me. And when I started winning money, I was actually winning him a lot of money at the time. And I just had no idea that was going on at all in the larger world. And I think, that's something where, if you go to one of these big daily fantasy finals and people are holding up the giant check and all that, like the guys who are winning them are winning a lot of the time a very small percentage of it because so many of them swap and sell their action to each other. And I think the companies don't love talking about that because it diminishes the idea that, hey, this guy just hit it big, rich, hit it big here and got rich quick. But, that's a big, big part of this world. And, there's a whole subculture of swapping and selling and who's got a piece of who and who's got what action that goes on behind the scenes. And that, fascinated the heck out of me. I just had no idea that was happening until I was really part of it.
Yeah, that was eye-opening. Now, like you said, the real battleground for daily fantasy really became New York. So what was Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's position when it came to daily fantasy?
His position was, this is gambling, and it's obvious, and there's nothing different about this in a lot of ways than online poker, and we don't allow online poker in the state of New York, so why on earth would we allow this? And, first the court agreed with him, and, there were all these discussions, and there was a protest, which I attended outside his office, and all this back and forth over game of skill and, game of chance and all that, and at the end of the day, his argument was that doesn't really matter, and what really matters is this has all the tenets of a gambling operation which we regulate similar to others in the state of New York. And, again, the lower courts certainly agreed with him for a time. And what happened was it went to higher levels of courts, went to appeals, and eventually the companies made a deal with him to pull out of the state of New York pending a legislation in the New York State legislature. And so that was essentially a short-term defeat for them, but they believed they could win in the legislature in the long term and get themselves legalized explicitly in New York, and they turned out to be right. And that's kind of one of the last things I cover in the book, which is the legal fight over how the New York legislation was passed, which really came down to the wire and was very much a crazy, sequence of events.
Yeah,
you kind of see how the sausage is made politics-wise.
Yeah. That was almost 2 o'clock in the morning, right? That was the last vote of the session, right?
Yeah, it was not actually the last specific vote, but it was one of the last few in the legislative session for 2016 before New York finished up. And, it really, truly did come down to the wire. And daily fantasy people were sweating it out nationwide because they knew that whatever way New York went was how this industry was going to go. And so when New York happened, it really was truly a last-minute thing, and it was expected not to pass at the last second, and then it kind of snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and daily fantasy was allowed to survive. And, it was really a pretty crazy, I don't want to give too much away about how that all happened in there, but it's a pretty crazy sequence of events, and to kind of see how that all happens at the assembly level was very eye-opening as well.
Daniel, we're running out of time. Can you tell everyone where to get Dueling with Kings and any other website you have to promote?
Yeah, sure. You can really get it pretty much anywhere. Order it on Amazon, buy it at Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore hopefully should have it. It's Dueling with Kings, High Stakes, Killer Sharks, and the get-rich premise of daily fantasy sports. I am Dan Barbarisi. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Barbarisi or go to my website, danbarbarisi.com. And again, please go buy Dueling with Kings wherever you'd like. Give it an Amazon order, and I really hope you enjoy it. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, like I said, the name of the book is Dueling with Kings by author Daniel Barbarisi, which is an amazing look into the world of daily fantasy sports. Thanks for joining us, Daniel.
All right, dude. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that'll do it for us this week on House of Cards. If you're going to one of the newly reopened casinos, poker rooms, or sports books, please be safe. We'll see you next time on House of Cards.
Tried to swallow